I talked the other night, last night I believe it was, about weather control. And, right after World War II, many things came out of the woodwork that became public. A lot of the research that was done during the war so that we could develop secret weapons and win the war were published in magazines and newspapers and in books. And a lot of the secrets of our enemies that we captured was also revealed to the public and disclosed. A lot of it wasn't, because a lot of it had import for the future and was kept secret. Some of it, of course, because of the manner in which it was captured and the people who were there when it was captured, who could not always be controlled and sometimes moved on down the line and could not be found again in order to be debriefed. Some of it, nevertheless, became public knowledge. Now, this was a time when there was a tremendous amount of scientific curiosity. There were a lot of papers published on, for instance, electrogravitics, what was called electrogravitics, electromagnetic propulsion. There were a lot of things published on alternative cures for diseases. There were a lot of experiments and articles and scientific papers written about weather control, the ability to manipulate the weather. Now, I heard about this at an early age because my father was a pilot in the United States Air Force. He was an electronics officer, and he was the officer in command of the weather shop on every base that we ever lived on. And he flew weather planes. And he and his friends would talk about what they saw in the sky and about their flying adventures and about their cadet days and about seeding the clouds to make it rain, about flying into the eyes of hurricanes to measure the strength of the storm and the direction that it was going and all of these kinds of things. You see, back before they had all these modern electronic instruments, pilots used to actually get in planes, and my father was one of them, and they would fly through these unbelievably violent hurricanes and typhoons and thunderstorms, and so that they could get into the middle of these storms and measure the wind velocity and measure the electronic charge of the air and measure the type of ions that were present and whether or not there was hail, and it was tremendously dangerous. And sometimes they would intentionally try to get an airplane struck by lightning to see what the lightning strike would do to the airplane and all kinds of things. And so at a very young age, I listened to these stories. I heard my father talk about them. I heard them, sometimes the pilots talk about what they called UFOs, or unidentified flying objects. I heard them talk about seeding the clouds with some kind of iodine crystals. And all kinds of different things, most of which I've forgotten over the years, and except for just the remembrance of what some of these conversations are about, I really don't remember the meat of it or where it led or anything like that. I was more interested in getting outside and playing with the kids or whatever. I was just a little fellow. And then when I got older, I began to see snatches of things back in the 50s and early 60s which just disappeared at some point. There were published in the scientific literature and in the journals, the scientific journals, many, many papers about all of the things that I've been discussing tonight. And then at some particular point, these things began to disappear, and they didn't. For instance, back in those days in popular science and popular mechanics and all the scientific journals and publications, you could just see hundreds and hundreds of these articles being written by scientists who were experimenting along these lines and trying to find ways to deal with these things. And one in particular was T. Townsend Brown, who all of a sudden his laboratory disappeared, he disappeared, and next he turns up wearing a Navy uniform and won't talk about anything that he ever published or ever did again. And the same thing happened with all of these papers and all the experimentation on weather control. It just simply disappeared, as if someone drew a curtain across the door where all of this stuff was, and you could never look in there again. And in reality, that's exactly what happened, ladies and gentlemen. They began to become successful in their search for the ability to control these things: electrogravitics, electromagnetic propulsion, weather, scalar technology, all kinds of things that the public, by and large, has never even heard of. And most of the people who have heard of these things have heard of them from far out wacky publications and things, and really don't know much about it at all. There are a very few who have devoted their life to studying this kind of stuff and trying to draw back that curtain far enough to see what's behind it. And they know a little bit, but not much. And I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I know a whole lot about this stuff, except that I do know that it exists. I have been able to tear a little hole in that curtain big enough for me to have discovered that all of it exists, all of it is real, all of it is owned and controlled by humans, not some extraterrestrials from some other planet, and it's going to be used to control humans. And that, folks, is unfortunate, but it is reality, and reality is what we must deal with.